Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is the second of our workshop series. My name is Ufuk Soytürk. I'm the founder and CEO of Across Restaurant Consulting. Today, we'll be covering how to achieve profitability and sustainable growth in restaurants. Accompanying me today will be Parth Patel, who will be moderating this workshop, and Scott Turner from Odin Hospitality. All of our conversations, I learned something from him. He is extremely experienced, very knowledgeable, and a great resource. I'm very happy that he's joining me today to present this very important topic. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I'm the founder of Odin Hospitality. We have three businesses that help operators grow in the hospitality space. So first of all, we have Odin Hospitality, which is our advisory services. And this is where we work with operators and hoteliers, and we analyze their operations. We help them with concept development. Really depends on what the individual client would like. We have Odin Resource Hub, which has proven tools and resources on there, which is aimed at kind of middle management level, because I always grew up in the industry and didn't have certain tools, certain templates. So that's where you can go and get them. And it's also where we host lots of videos, ebooks, that type of thing as well. And finally, we have Odin Procurement. So we help hotels, restaurants in the hospitality space here in the UK improve their supply chain. Year to date, 2023, we saved our clients £500,000 in their annual purchases. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and Odin Hospitality.
Scott, the reason why we have this conversation is Scott touched base. Everybody focuses on revenue, right? But revenue is very hard to control because it's not in our control, it's in the guest control. We can do good marketing. We can create the niche for the brand in the marketplace, but what is really in our control is the cost. Since the goal of in your business organization is profitability, in order to manage anything, right, in any business, we need to see the big picture. We need to see what is happening, and the results should be accurate and as timely as possible. And how do we get to see the big picture? We had a podcast last week about accrual basis accounting and how it is crucial to manage any business, including restaurants. And good financial reporting is critical in getting full visibility into your operations, whether this is revenue reporting like daily, weekly, or comparative revenue reporting, or cost reporting. Today, we will focus on the cost side of things. And how do you get the big picture, and how can you manage that big picture? And I think the first thing that any restaurant company or any hospitality company should do is accrual basis accounting, and to have timely, accurate financial reporting. So we will look at, food cost, beverage cost, and the tools that are necessary to achieve management. What can be some of the things that entities can put in place? And finally, we will look at supply chain related things. We can go to the next slide part. So how to manage your restaurant's cost of goods sold? There is theoretical cost, right? And then there is the actual cost. So theoretical cost means what is the cost according to the recipe costing, what the cost should be. Actual costing is what it is. And how do we know either one of these, right? So we will cover inventory systems and theoretical costing. Actual costing goes back to what I just covered, accrual basis accounting. When you record all of the invoices for the period and perform reconciliations, this is done by the accounting department. All of the invoices are recorded. You do your inventory counts, and you do those counts very well, then you get to the actual costing. So say you get to an actual costing, it's a dollar figure, and then you divide that with the revenue for the relevant piece, whether this is food, non-alcoholic beverage, wine costs, what have you. So how can you make sense of that, right? In order to manage it, you need to make sense of numbers. Numbers don't live individually, like they make sense as comparative to something else. So the first thing is, how does it make sense to the system that you created, which is your recipes, which is your theoretical cost? So we will talk about theoretical cost, how to measure it, and how can you do this comparison on an ongoing basis.
Gone are the days now in terms of when historically we used to look at actual versus budget. Kind of those days for me have gone in the past now, because there's much clearer metrics to be able to use when you're analyzing any part of the business, but in particular on cost of goods sold. And I think the key on this one as well is that you have to make the right people in the business accountable for the right metric, because if you start making the wrong people accountable, then you start losing engagement and it becomes a target no one can achieve, and that just is bad for results. It's bad for engagement for your team, and it's no way to kind of get them motivated. So what do we mean by that? I think, when you're looking at metrics for cost of goods sold, it isn't just about actual versus budget, because that's an overarching metric. And the budget is only as good as what was written a year ago when you first submitted the budget. So, if we take July now, the budget will have been written in probably September, October last year. Since then, there's been lots of changes in pricing, in fluctuation, in supply chain. So that budget becomes irrelevant, and it's the quickest way to make your team switch off. So by using actual versus theoretical, what you're doing there is you're taking your actual sales mix, you're looking at the profitability of the sales mix, and you're holding people accountable to what that sales mix says. So if that theoretical cost is coming in at 20% and you deliver a cost of 21%, then you aren't managing your business as optimal as you should be doing based on the recipes that you've developed and you've put into a system. Then the other piece on this is, if a chef doesn't influence what he buys for whatever reason, there's a purchasing manager who negotiates pricing, there's a menu that comes down from central office, whatever that reason might be, you can't hold a chef accountable for actual versus budget. And you can't hold him accountable for actual versus theoretical cost, because he doesn't actually have an influence on what he buys. So when you're looking at talking with a chef, the one metric that the chef cannot argue against is the variance report. And we spent a lot of time on this with Derek Smith on a conversation a couple of weeks ago, in terms of saying, if you go down that variance report with your chef and there's variances that sit in there, they have to be able to tell you what all those variances are. And there's no other influence other than that chef being able to manage the business properly that would lead to that variance not being something that the chef could control. Same with the purchaser. The purchaser is the one who goes out and he gets the chef's specification. He finds the right supplier on the right credit terms and negotiates the right price. So if he's then being challenged around theoretical cost and how that looks, then obviously he's then targeted on a metric that makes sense for him. So what my big takeaway from this section of what we're talking about is, make sure the metrics that you're giving your people are relevant for the role that they do, and make sure that they have an influence on those metrics. Otherwise, all you're going to do is create an example of excuses for people to use. So really important that you look at things a bit differently and stop using budget, because budget's only as good as it was at the time of writing and the person essentially who signed off the budget's opinion of what that should be. So yeah, for me, it's very much about kind of using actual versus theoretical and then delving down into the results from there. So yeah, it's just a different way of looking at cost of goods, but it's definitely a much more productive way of doing it as well.
Great explanation, Scott. Scott and I thought that it will be a good thing to talk about inventory systems, because theoretical and actual costing, especially if you have like multiple restaurants, the best way to do it, to have a handle on your purchases, on the cost, and theoretical versus actual costing is through the use of an inventory system. These systems are similar, but they have differences as well. But at the heart, most of them do the same thing, albeit these nuances might be important for your specific business. what can you do with these systems? And these systems are Restaurant 365's operational module, Margin Edge, Craftable, Marketman, and Toast Extra Chef. At the heart of each one of these systems is ordering, receiving, recording the invoice into the system, putting the recipes in, costing those recipes, having a connection to most of the POS devices, inventory count in the system, and reporting. We emphasize the importance of how, in order to achieve the end result of managing your cost of goods sold, you need to have a chain of events, excellent accounting. In order to achieve excellent accounting, you need to have excellent financial controls. You need to have good accountability in the organization, right? In order to work these systems, in order to not just implement, but have accurate stuff happening in these systems, you need to have good financial controls at the same place. You need to make sure that things are done in a consistent and accurate way. Whether you lose employees, whether there is like retention problems or not, these systems, whatever information goes in, must be correct information, right? So at the end of the day, we talked about theoretical and actual costing. If these systems are implemented and maintained properly, the end result is really magical. You get to see the changes of purchase prices. You can compare multiple branches with each other, and you can also like approve invoices in there. You can see the fluctuations in the purchase prices, which we know in the last 2 years is extremely important, right? I don't see how you can do this with a manual system to have that kind of visibility into the prices. And these systems can spell out the theoretical versus actual costing, which is the variance, seeing that variance on an SKU level basis, because the system has every component fed into it in order to give you this information. Inventory count, how much has been received, what has been sold, and what is the recipe to make this dish. All of these are in the system. So like magic, it gives you the variance on an SKU level basis. It gives you the target rate that you need to hit, and it gives you how much you veered off from that target with live prices. That's also very important, with live prices, meaning if the price of meat, goes up, you're a steakhouse, right? Like significantly, now your previous conceptions on what that cost should be is different. So the system knows each and single one of these, and it gives you the variance on an SKU level basis. My experience is knowing a general sense of direction of you need to hit 26%, and if you are hitting 28%, that you still made a significant progress. Like theoretical versus actual, even at a like food cost, wine cost level, if you know that and that information is reliable, you are maybe 60-70% already in there that you can take some action. But seeing this variance on an SKU level basis, you are 95% there, because that information gives you the ability to take action. If you know that your variance is coming significantly from the seafood, then I would ask the question, is that because of the vestige? If you are processing, if you are getting the fish as a whole and butchering it, right, it can be because of maybe the recipe is wrong, or maybe the folks who are butchering the fish, they need some additional training. So then you can narrow down the area of focus. And if you are doing inventory counts on a weekly basis, and I think you should do that if you have a significant variance between theoretical and actual, if you are doing this on a weekly basis, then you can take timely action, and in a couple of weeks, that variance is going to shrink significantly. If we are talking about variance of, let's say, 3% of cost, it means you are losing 3% of your sales and significant chunk of your profit, right? Because our industry works at an average of 13% profit margin. So if you are losing 3% in cost of goods sold, then it means that instead of 16%, you are hitting 13%. What's the difference between 16% and 13%? It's like 20%. You are losing 20% of your profit. The whole ordeal, any business, is to make profit, right? And you make profit, free cash flow, you can spend it on marketing, you can spend it on the things that you want to change in the restaurant. Without profit, you can't make the changes as much because you want available cash to spend on the restaurant. Scott, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when you're looking at tech in any business, I think it has to do a couple of things. Otherwise, you have to ask questions of whether it's worthwhile bringing into the business. And I think one of them is, does it create more visibility to you around the key principles of your business? And that's one of the biggest things. From there then is, does it make any other part of the business that you're operating more efficient, that allows those people who are using that time to spend it with their teams and spend it with their guests, which is going to help other parts of the business that we're not talking about today. And I think when it comes to inventory systems, this is one of the ones where, you know, it can save a valuable amount of time for your people if you're currently operating in a manual process. Because it takes out all that manual process and the system automates it for you. So that person then can save a lot of time, whether that's on raising manual purchase orders, doing stock counts, doing manual costings, you know, understanding order sheets and where to order products from. Is he ordering the right tomatoes? Is he not ordering the right tomatoes? It takes out all of that, and it takes out a lot of issues around human error. When it comes to inventory systems, you know, I advocate MarketMan in the UK because I've used it a number of years, and I know how much you can drill down into data and you can drill down into results to see where it was. We were operating a business in Harrods, and we could make a pretty good guess at how many sugars were going into the coffee because we had the inventory system that fine-tuned that we could correlate the Le Perouche into how many coffees we'd sold. And that just goes to show how much level you can do it. But you've got to remember, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to have someone who takes ownership for the system, who makes sure that the data is completely clean. Otherwise, it starts leading to other situations. So it's really key that you have people in the business that see the benefit of these systems and can make sure that the information going in and the information going out is right. There's a huge piece now into, you've put it on there, you know, if you look at that process of how to do all of that, and you look at integrations from POS, and we look at integrations from accounting systems, and you look at how you can place an order, receive an order, scan the invoice gets recognized on the system that then goes through into the accounting system. The amount of time and process that you're saving there from an efficiency perspective is phenomenal. And, you know, if I look at that from an accounting perspective, you know, if you're streamlining the invoice process from being received in the building to then going through to the accounts office, to then going through payables, first of all, your suppliers are getting paid quicker. They're getting paid within the credit terms, which means that your overall partnership as a supplier-customer relationship is much more solid. It gives you much more kind of power to kind of sit there and negotiate prices because they know they're going to get the cash. They know that cash flow is going to come in for them. And what it also does is it frees up those accounts people time to help operators digest information more as well, which is what's key, because as much as a finance department is there to keep the business safe and to make sure it's working in a proper, diligent environment, they're also there to support operators digest information properly to help them grow the business. Because you have to remember, you know, certainly the case, I was not a mathematician. I wasn't good at maths at school, and you know, I love doing hospitality, but I needed finance people, and I can still tell you that the guy who helped me understand cost of sales when I was 23, 24, assistant bar manager doing beverage costs for the first time. And the time he spent with me was valuable. So I think anything you can do to free up time of your people to invest back into people is going to make your business more sustainable. And I think, looking at this, and we're going to touch on some other bits about my favorite word at the minute, which is de-skilling. And some of these systems, especially MarketMan, can really de-skill a lot of the cost of sales process, which can be quite complex, and makes it really easy, which puts your senior people back on the floor with teams, with guests, that's delivering much better, much stronger guest experience, which is what we're all here to do, that keeps the revenue coming in, that gives us the opportunity to flow it down into profit. So for me, inventory system is one of those ones. And I think when you're looking at inventory systems, make sure it's got clear reporting, clear dashboards. And that's not loads of numbers on a CSV file. That is graphs. That is really visual dashboards. A blink of an eye, you can understand what the results say. Because if you don't have that, then again, you're starting to get into the realms of where you're having to make sure that you've always got knowledgeable senior people on there, and it should be really easy for people to understand so that you can digest that through the business and make everyone in the business accountable. So make sure that that reporting is really on point, and make sure you have the POS connection, because that POS connection is what's going to help you generate the theoretical cost. It's going to help you generate the variance reports without having to do manual process. And that's what this should be doing from a tech system. It should be making the whole process more efficient by working with other tech platforms to give you the data at your fingertips to then be able to analyze. You shouldn't have to go fighting for data in a business, because it takes too long. By the time you've done manual counts and manual reconciliation, it's probably 2 or 3 days down the line anyway. So even if there is a problem, there's not much you can do about it in terms of fixing it, because you've already traded for 3 days. So it's really key that you have everything talking on point, so that you can hit the count, you can hit the reconciliation on the day of the stock take, so that you can get the results out and you can tackle anything that doesn't quite look right straight away. So that's my take on inventory systems. And I'm more than happy to speak to anyone and about my experiences with MarketMan and why inventory systems are so important to hospitality. If anyone's keen to know, just find me on LinkedIn, and happy to have a conversation.
And Scott, we talked about deskilling, which is an amazing thing to. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I think we have to understand now as an industry that we are bringing people into the industry now that don't have experience, that don't want to be working 60, 70 hours a week. We have a different workforce coming into the business. So in every single operation I'm working in right now, that's from 5-star London hotel to boutique hotel chain to founder-led businesses, we're talking about how we can de-skill process. That means they aren't reliant on the amount of people in the business. Certainly from a kitchen perspective, they aren't reliant on having lots of chefs there with knife skills, with experience of cooking, because certainly in the London market right now, chefs is probably one of the premium positions to find. And we're looking at how we can de-skill processes. The other thing in terms of why I think it's important to de-skill processes, as a generation now, we are more creative than we've ever been before. And that's largely because of social media and the fact that people are going onto social media. They're being creative with photography. They're being creative with words. They're being creative with video. So when they come into your hospitality environment and you give them menial tasks, it's not what gets them engaged. It's not what gets them enthused. It's not what empowers them. And people don't want to be commis chefs for 2 years anymore to be able to learn how to use a knife. So when you start looking at these operations, we have to take ourselves back to what the core principle is of why we run hospitality businesses. And that is, for those people coming through the door, we give them the most memorable experience, that they go away and come back again and again and again. And the people who work for us have an equally memorable experience, and they learn skills, whether that's hard skills or soft skills, that they can take with them for the rest of their lives. Those 2 things are the core of why we do what we do. So we need to understand that if we want to deliver great guest experience, we have to stop being reliant on skill. And that means we have to de-skill. Now, there's a couple of different examples that I'll give you just quickly that kind of sums up everything that I've just said in a much easier, digestible way than me kind of fluffing around it. So two, I'll give you one which is very practical and the other one which is back onto inventory systems. So the practical one is, you have to chop a load of onions for the base of a stock. You, in the olden days, would have put a commie on there because it'd have been much cheaper, it'd have been much quicker. You're training the guys how to use knives and all the rest of it, and all the different elements that go into that. As we've just said, people now want to be creative, so they don't want to do the onions. They want to be the guys who are playing with dishes, playing with ingredients, and creating things. So you have to look at that and go, okay, years ago it would have been much cheaper to produce in-house, whereas now, with cost of labor increasing and cost of goods being there as it is, with the lack of talent in the market, with people phoning in sick and all the different reasons that there is there now, that cost of producing that batch of chopped onions has increased significantly, and there's a lot more risk to it than there would have been maybe 5 years ago. So if you were to now buy in the same onions chopped, they go through a machine, so they're super consistent. Back to that memorable guest experience, consistency is number one in terms of delivering that. You're not reliant on skill. You're not making people go through menial tasks, which means you can focus on training them, on them being creative, which keeps them engaged in the industry. You have a lot more benefits now for buying in some of those products, because fundamentally, chopped onion in-house, chopped onion on a machine that delivers the same quality, the same consistency at the same price, you have to ask yourself which one's more important to the end result, which is keeping guests happy, keeping staff happy. So that's a bit of a thought provoker. The other one is, how do you de-skill processes to give your senior leaders time back to spend in the operation? So I'll give you a prime example of why I love MarketMan. MarketMan has a function that means when you buy a new product, so let's say a bottle of whiskey, they all have a barcode. You scan the barcode and you attach that barcode, which is the barcode that's used in the supermarket or wherever else. So there's no real work involved for you as an operator. You put that in the system, and the barcode is attached to the product in the system. So if you are a high-end restaurant that has lots of bottles of wine, lots of bottles of whiskey, you now don't need to have your most senior people counting that stock, because they're the people who know those products best. You could now have someone like a bartender, a head bartender, who wants more responsibility, who wants to get more involved in progressing their career. You give them his phone, you give them the app with MarketMan, you scan the barcode, and it instantly puts the right bottle on the stock, and then all that person has to do is count the bottles. So it completely de-skills that process. And in the meantime, what you have is you have a senior leader who can be spending those 3, 4, 5 hours time of stock taking with his team, which is much more effective in terms of delivering results. But what he also is he's more independent when it comes to managing stock, because he hasn't been the one physically counting the stock as well. So he starts to challenge because he's naive around what is sitting there in terms of stock on hand. So it makes that whole process much more diligent, and you de-skill it, and you give back your senior leader the power of time in the operation. So, de-skilling sounds like a really horrible word, and when I speak to chefs about it especially, the first thing that I'll say to them is, this isn't about reducing quality, it isn't about compromising what you do in any way. If anything, it's about delivering higher consistency and a better quality at the same cost that enables your team to do something else that empowers them and enthuses them more, which can only be a good thing. And once they get over that kind of egotistical thing of, we have to make everything in-house, you actually start seeing the results get better and better over time, because they start being able to kind of get into that in more areas, and they can focus on making really good, high quality USP items in-house, which is much more effective from a guest experience point of view. So I think it's, people listening to this that are running operations, I would encourage to go and sit with the chef and look at the non-emotive items that are in the business that you might be able to buy in, that allows your people who are there to spend more time on delivering stronger results from whatever else they're making in-house. So it's more consistent, less time consuming, requires less people in the kitchen, whatever the focus and the aim should be. I'd encourage everyone to go back and look at the business and do that over the next week or so.
No, Scott, that was amazing. The skilling and with the example of barcoding, reading the barcodes, doing the stock count with the barcodes, because as we all know, if you have a large, for example, especially on the wine stuff, especially with the wines, right? From the same vineyard, there comes long names of wines, right? These $300, $500 per bottle wines. You need a sommelier to do the count, to be able to classify each wine with the vintage correctly. If you are the way that it's usually done is you enter the name pops up in most of the beverage programs, right? The name pops up, then you enter the quantity. But that name, even writing down that name, finding the wine that matches to yours, is a specialty that you need to know the wine. When it's reduced to scanning the barcode and the computer doing the match, I mean, this is the thing of I think that adds incredible value to or in your kind of organizations, because getting a hold on to food costs isn't too hard. You can even do it with an Excel. These systems are even better to do it, but especially on the liquor side, when you have 500 labels of wine, you have 600 labels of liquor, right? And in a high-end restaurant, especially, doing the count for what constitutes maybe 20-30% of your cost of goods sold is freaking hard. It's freaking hard. Anybody who has done that, anybody who has read the results would testify to that. To be able to use these systems to the nature that you just mentioned is a huge game changer to getting a hold on to the liquor and wine side of things. I really appreciate you sharing that experience.
No, and I think it's one of those, Ufuk, as well, where you have to understand what the pain points of your operation are, and you have to think about how you can make those pain points easier, because we're in a situation where attraction of people is an issue in the industry, and then when you have them in the business, retention is an issue in the industry. So it's about how you can overcome some of those issues by looking at the pain points of the operation, speak to your people, speak to your leaders, and look at how you can work with some of the great tech options on the market right now, and you can find answers to those pain points and then make those people accountable by saying, you've told us the pain points, you've told us what is difficult for you in the business, and we've gone out and got this system. Now you need to be accountable for making sure that it's implemented properly and that the people in the business engage it, because this is going to save you time, help you with being short-staffed, etc., etc. And it's really about then kind of listening, taking action, and working with the people in the business to implement it successfully, because all of those three things, if any one of those falls down, then the system isn't able to deliver its full potential. So it's really important to do that as well. But I agree with everything you're saying. I think there's definite platforms out there that can make a huge benefit to operations.
Thank you, Scott. We are coming to the top of the hour. Should take questions? I know we had more stuff to present. Maybe, Scott, if you'll be open to it, we can talk about the supply chain side of things in a separate conversation, if that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
I would love to continue this conversation. I think people have a lot of benefit from your experience. Parth, do we have any questions?
Just checking.
I really appreciate everyone for sticking with us.
Yes, good question for Dean Labey. In the BOH, is equipment being measured, cost versus repair, maintenance, etc.? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what Dean says here, and it's a great question actually, and it's something that when I worked in hotels, we used to use a system called Hot Sauce, and what we used to do is everything used to get logged through Hot Sauce, exactly like it would if you were, you see Amazon drivers going round, and you would attach a few different things. So you'd attach rooms to it, and you'd look at rooms, you'd attach what the jobs were and what the machinery was. And then what we would do on a regular basis is we would pull reports and see what the most recurring issues were. And the reason was we'd do that is twofold. And I've done this in kitchens as well. And recently we worked with a hotel group from the Netherlands, 19 strong hotels. And we did a kitchen exercise in terms of how we systemize their kitchen operations. And one of the first questions we asked was, what can we see your maintenance reports from the supplier so we can see what equipment's breaking? Because what we then used to do is we used to go and have a look at all those things. So say a hotel room, if the coffee table was breaking all the time and we were having to go and do remedial work to that coffee table, you would have an argument that potentially it wasn't fit for purpose. And we'd start looking at what the frequency of jobs versus the cost of jobs was for the particular piece of equipment. And then we'd start asking questions of whether actually it was better to replace or to keep maintaining it, or if we were going through a refurbishment, how could we then upgrade what we've got there? And we'd start analyzing what that kind of cost was that came from it. And we've done the same with kitchens as well, in terms of looking at, if a certain part on an oven is repeatedly breaking down for whatever reason that might be. We used to, when I run the bakery brand, our provers used to break down quite frequently, and on that occasion what we would do is we'd always make sure our maintenance company had that part in stock so that we weren't seeing downtime for a particular period of time, so that we could have those things in stock and we could call them in quickly rather than waiting 10 to 21 days or even more nowadays for that part. So I think it's a really good question, Dean, because I think analyzing all those type of little bits in the business means if you were coming to do a second site, you're already ahead of the game in terms of, should we start looking at other kitchen equipment, other FF&E, other elements of that as well, to make sure that you're kind of optimizing that profitability that comes from it. So yeah, really, really good question on that one.
Yeah. And do restaurant chains face the same challenges as independent restaurant owners when it comes to improving back of house operations in the US? Could you please provide an overview of market difference in this regard?
Managing one or two restaurants is very different from managing 6, 8, or something like that. Number one, when you open restaurants in different states, things change significantly. Even in different metro areas, the price, the markups that the distributors charge, you are working with different suppliers. All these things require some efforts to be like duplicated or quadrupled, depending on depending on how many different places that you are operating under. Laws and regulations are different at the same time in different states, right? So having a multi-unit operation is significantly more complicated. That's why using these systems that we mentioned, creating common SOPs on how to do anything from recipes to accounting to getting AP paid, all of these things is crucial. Think about like McDonald's, right? There is a reason to why they do what they do. If they let even like a couple of percentage points of control slip, the burger that you are eating will be significantly different from the burger that you're eating anywhere else. And one other thing that I would like to say is, we are not looking at this like, theoretical versus actual just for the sake of optimizing profits. This also helps operations to standardize. Chef can't be everywhere at the same time, right? So by the virtue of having this tool, whether this is on the food side or on the bar side, especially on the bar, there is no chef to control how a martini is prepared. If there is a significant variance, it would also tell you that the food may not be prepared the way that you want, according to the recipe in the file. So that also means a consistency problem. So, especially when you're operating in a unit environment, if these are spread over, like the US is a huge place, right? Like if they are 5 hours away from you by plane, if one is in one coast, the other is another coast, utilizing financial controls, utilizing systems, utilizing recipes, same training, all these things are extremely important. Versus if one restaurant is here, one restaurant is 2 miles down the road, you are working with the same vendors, controlling things is less formalized. You might need less systems, or you might have less resources to work these systems, or you might not have the sophistication to implement, train, and maintain these systems. I would like to emphasize, just like I did in the previous podcast, maintaining these systems. It's not just about implementing them. Just like Scott said, garbage in, garbage out. This is an ongoing effort. Financial controls must be top-notch if you are working with such inventory systems. We at Across, what we started to do is, it's not just we implement operational systems, but we also write the SOP tailored to that company to use that system. That's the crucial part. The SOP training part, how that system works for your company. Understanding the system, understand the operations of the company, and bringing them together with SOP, something written, and with training.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give you an example. So in 2018, I was working for an investment business, and we ran operations in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in London, and then New York, Boston. And when I was made COO, one of our primary jobs that we set out to do in order to manage the business effectively was how we could align as much of the business globally as possible into one common denominator, but keeping each individual area unique to that individual area. So what I mean by that is we had one set of chartered accounts across the whole business, no matter where that business was. And you know, you're asking the question about the US. This is 4 different countries, 4 different currencies, 4 different nuances in terms of market. So we made sure that the chartered of accounts was the same. So that meant that whenever we were analyzing the business as a whole, as a country, as a region, that we were looking at the same data set across the world globally. That was the first thing that we did. Second of all, we created one common currency, and that was dollars. And we reported everything in dollars, but then we localized it into local currency for the operators as well. So we used Power BI to do that. And then we looked at best-in-class systems in each individual country that we operated, and we consolidated it through Power BI to be able to give us one dashboard that was in one common currency that could run on one set of chartered accounts that could give us full visibility over every single business in exactly the same way. And I think that's, for me, when you're looking at multi-site, and I know Troy's listening to this as well, and you know, I'm sure he can give amazing insight into this as well, but having that visibility of every single unit that you're running under the same parameters, under the same set of chartered accounts, under the same metrics, under the same elements, means that you can then go in and you can analyze the businesses in the same way. You can then start putting them into trends and putting them into 13-week trends and starting to see how each individual area differs, because no 2 areas are the same, whether that's in one country or 4 countries, and everyone has different peaks and troughs. So, you know, the peaks that we see in London are very different to the north of England, for example, here, and it was the same across different countries. So how you then start analyzing that in trends and start seeing the peaks and the troughs come in allows you to prioritize where you best put yourself in terms of working with those people in those businesses to help them grow and maintain where they are as a business perspective. So I think, you know, my big thing here is I don't think there has to be lots of differences as a multi-site operator if you're managing in different areas. It's about getting the diligence and the discipline back of house that puts everyone on the same benchmark, that allows you to manage the business in the same way no matter where they are. And then you start talking about local nuances when it's relevant from it. But from a reporting perspective that kind of flags those bits up, keeping everyone on the same benchmarks was one of the ones that made it a huge game changer in terms of managing the same brands across different countries, different continents, different currencies for us.
That was great, Scott. Louis Gabriel made a comment. Your managers shouldn't feel like data is used to put them down or trap them, rather as a tool to help them find the leaks in a restaurant's cash flow. So true, so true. And I think it's a collaborative effort. Like if finance and operations work together to create the SOPs, create these systems together. Operation works these systems, finance reports on these systems, right? Because as Scott mentioned, different people are responsible for different things. Your purchaser might be purchasing, chef is using the food to basically cook. So every department has their own effect in this chain of events. And I think it's when I say collaborative efforts, what I mean is if the purchaser is looking at alternative products, chef helps him understand that concern. If one product is the same quality or maybe slightly less and it's 20% cheaper and it's still a very good product for the business, then that is a company decision, right? I think goals aligning across the board for the organization is very important. If purchaser's goal is to make everything cheap, regardless of the quality, chef's goal is to buy the best product, but it's very expensive and it doesn't make economic sense, right? If everybody has an independent goal, then that organization is not going to function very efficiently, effectively. That's also when I'm talking about accountable, I mean a common accountability, but everybody is they have their own sections as well. If purchase prices are going up, purchaser is going to respond to that. If there is a difference between theoretical and actual cost, that's due to the production variance, and then the chef will answer to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it's about collaboration as well, isn't it? The purchaser and the chef should be best friends, and they should work together for one common goal. And, if your average check is $10 and you want to put a Wagyu burger on there, then you have to understand, you have to be realistic about what is the potential. And that's where you need to work with the purchasing guy as a chef, and the chef needs to work with the purchaser to understand what the common goal is and deliver it as well. So I think, you're absolutely right what you're saying. I'm a big believer in making people accountable, but empowering them to be accountable, because there's nothing worse than making someone accountable and not giving him the power to deliver. So making people accountable, making people empowered, and then kind of having a culture of collaboration within the business. That's the way that you can achieve the best results, especially when it comes to looking at cost of sales and costs that sit in there as well. Being very objective about what data tells you as well. If you pull a menu engineering sheet off there and it tells you things, then you have to start asking questions. Same as if you pull off maintenance reports and that type of thing. It's about being objective and working together with all the stakeholders in the business. And I talk a lot about how the best finance people aren't the people who deliver the best profit. It's the best finance managers are the people who work with the teams on the floor to deliver the best results, because they're the ones that have so much knowledge that they can teach people, back to making this industry an industry that is going to give people skills for life, teaching them parts of that kind of finance and business that we weren't taught at school, is what people don't get in some other industries. So kind of use that knowledge and give people that knowledge and share people that knowledge, because giving them that time and helping them feel empowered, helping them feel engaged to be able to deliver results is a lot better than sitting in control calls and P&L reviews with them every month, hitting them with a stick because they don't have as much knowledge as you to deliver what they need to deliver. So I think it's where that collaboration is key across the board. And I talked about the first ever finance manager that helped me with cost of sales. He was an anomaly in terms of some of the ones I dealt with throughout my career. So I think take from that what you can and kind of work as a team to deliver.
Great comment, Scott. Empowering is very important. Working together, great points. Arno is asking, what's the food waste cost and average food chain in the US can have? So my thought on that is percentage of the total turnover. I think it depends on the business. A seafood restaurant would have a higher food waste due to the short periods that something can go to waste. But I think the most important thing is what I encourage companies to do is having a wastage sheet in the kitchen and write everything down there. I don't consider wastage as part of cost of goods sold. I see that as a separate line item to be understood and analyzed. Is this wastage because of the supplier? Is this wastage because of fluctuation demand? Is it because we didn't order the right quantity, like changing customer demand? I think I see that as a whole different thing that we need to tackle and not part of the total cost of goods sold.
Yeah, I think the exciting bit about that now is how we can not have food waste at all, because we're starting to use some of those those hours back from menial tasks to develop things with food waste, right? And one of the chefs I'm working with on a new concept, we have the restaurant, and then we've developed almost like a street food fast casual concept that goes off the wastage of everything that's there. And I think that's what's exciting. And we always worked on kind of 0.5% variance when we were looking at food cost. But again, that's then when you start looking at yield and things like that. But I think the exciting opportunity with food waste is that it's starting to be talked about a lot more now than it probably was before. There's tech out there, the hotel company that we were working with, they want to get net carbon by 2030. They have AI readers above all their bins in their main kitchen, so that when stuff comes back from the restaurant, when stuff comes back from the breakfast buffet, it tells them how much is coming back of each individual item, and they analyze that and look at how they can adjust stock levels. They can adjust what goes on the buffet as a minimum stock and that type of thing in order to reduce food waste. So I think, what's an acceptable target? I think that's where you should be making your chefs creative and your teams creative around what you can do with that food waste, so that it eliminates it, rather than kind of putting a benchmark on what should be coming back each month. Would be my view on that.
Profiting at the start when you are purchasing is what we will cover in the next conversation.
Sounds good.
Scott, thank you so much. You have been
my
amazing,
absolute pleasure,
as always. And I think many folks benefited from this conversation. We appreciate everyone for sticking with us, joining us,
sure.
taking the time. Scott from Odin Hospitality, an amazing person, an amazing operator. I appreciate you joining and for your great insight, Scott, as always. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Exactly. Thank you. We've always had great chats, so today was no different. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Part.
Thank you, guys.